I used to think that learning curriculum online just consisted of reading a textbook, listening to poorly recorded lectures virtually, or clicking through modules that didn't relate to my job or interests at all. Can you imagine online curriculum that is engaging, transformative, and inclusive? My name is Sarah Knowles, and today I'm going to give my perspective on Case Study 2 in Instructional Systems Design, because until starting this degree program, I never even imagined the vast possibilities of putting coursework in an online format. Let's start with the case study itself. It's entitled, Modify an Existing Class to be Delivered Online. The prompt begins by explaining we are to redesign a traditionally in-person course on difficult conversations into an online format. There seems to be two main objectives here: to make the course more accessible to the current student body and to attract more students from outside the local area. It seemed interesting to me that this course was being thought of as a recruitment tool. My thoughts on that will come up a little later. Further, we need to revamp this curriculum to align with the current social justice climate. This is quite the task to be accomplished in basically a semester. Initial thoughts of this course went to questions that I would ask in an analysis. Here I wanted to really show the standard format of each phase of ADDIE that I will highlight during our time together. My first thoughts were regarding the actual instruction change itself. Because the case study tells us that the curriculum content could be out of date, I want to figure out the gap. What's actually out of date? Is the course content insensitive considering the current social justice climate, or is it just not fully inclusive of current events or movements that students would relate to or want to talk about, like Black Lives Matter or Me Too? Would students be getting other information prior to this course from prerequisites or not? Would this be more of an introductory course, or would it be mandatory? These questions would help me determine the range of development or preparation that students would have prior to the course. Finally, I would like to survey past students of the course to see what worked best and their opinions on content changes. My mind then went to the format considerations of changing this in-person face-to-face course into a fully online version. So I just added these items to my analysis. My first thought, since this would be online, is if students will still be engaging in the same campus culture and climate together. This would be relevant for campus-wide examples in the curriculum, but also action-oriented steps during the course. I also considered budget here. Since recruitment seemed to be an objective of the course, I'm going to function on an assumption that we have some kind of initial budget to convert the curriculum to engaging online materials. The final piece I needed to consider before making any recommendations was Bennetts Stages of Diversity and Intercultural Sensitivity. This model basically shows a continuum for how people engage with cultural difference. As people transverse this continuum from left to right, we can exhibit behaviors or words that coincide with the 3 ethnocentric and 3 ethno-relative stages. I think it's important to remember this is a theory grounded in observation, and it would be important to me to teach this not as striving to reach some point of perfect intercultural communication, but the consistent engagement over time will help us become generally more sensitive to intercultural communication. We could all predominantly fit into one of these development levels, but our words and actions can still transverse other levels in the continuum. Next, we're really going to get started into the design portion of the ADDIE process. I'm going to assume the analysis indeed showed a need to continue the course online, and we need to focus on 1, changing the curriculum, and 2, changing the course format entirely. Again, I'm going to assume we have some kind of budget, especially if the course is going to be viewed with a recruitment lens. And I don't know the exact curriculum, but I think high authenticity and vulnerability will be needed in any curriculum going about difficult conversations, as that alludes to things like implicit bias, social justice needs, and social issues. I'm going to briefly overview my design thoughts here and then go into some specifics on the right. Bennetts Stages will be important in understanding and teaching to a student's various levels of cultural sensitivity. This theory will be the bedrock of understanding students' development, their ability to communicate across cultural boundaries, and helping them bridge from the ideology of one level to another. For content, we will invest less time into things like learning style assessments and more time into cultural relevance and sensitivity of the course itself. For format, we will invest in various multimedia sources so students can engage with the content in different formats. And finally, the meat of this instruction should be students practicing communication and behavior. My idea for this is decision-based scenarios. This is just a brief storyboard or overview, bird's eye view of the goals or the components of this course. We will need learning objectives across the course components. I think the course could be broken into these 4 areas of self-identity development, decision-based scenarios, discussion, and reflection. Decision-based scenarios. I love this general idea, especially for an online format. The idea is that we would film different scenarios acted out that coincide with each level of Bennetts stages. After one portion of the video plays, the student is asked a question and they make a decision on how they would respond to or how they think the scenario should play out. Students should receive feedback based on how the scenario then plays out and narration regarding their decisions. If in the scenario, the student is deciding to be more or less sensitive across cultural communication, the program should prompt and tell the student that feedback. This allows for multiple storylines of scenarios across each stage, so more students will find scenarios relevant to their culture or background, as well as engage in scenarios they normally wouldn't. Furthermore, this would be a great way to learn since the scenarios are pre-created based on theory. There's no situation where one student is learning about their privilege at the detriment to another student's cultural trauma or the expectation of relaying their experiences unwillingly. Finally, all the course materials could be recorded and transcribed, further in various languages appropriate to the school's student body. And briefly for the development phase, the entire course could have synchronous and asynchronous components. There should be learning objectives for tracking and evaluation purposes, and supporting materials and literature should be provided. Students would probably benefit from discussion of materials either verbally, via discussion boards, or both. The process of this implementation should continue as a course over an entire semester, as I assume the previous course was, as opposed to one-time instruction to allow for students' growth. Students can engage with as many decision-making cultural perspectives as they want. They can also engage with the supplemental literature, reading, videos, or other content provided with each module that best suits their understanding of Bennetts Stages. Utilizing online creation tools like Powtoon or Prezi, like what we learned in this course, can make all of these online pieces incredibly engaging. A quick note on evaluation, since it's wildly important to show the outcomes of instructional design. We could use any model of evaluation, but I'm thinking through Kirkpatrick since that's what my team used in our stakeholder project. I would first roll out a small pilot to get a reaction from students regarding the usability and content of this course. If the school could get a program sophisticated enough to track students' decision-making while they're making decisions in the scenarios, that would be awesome. But minimally, I would track a pre and post survey of the course that frames the learning objectives. If there's any way to follow up with students or show behavior change through reflection, that would also be important. And finally, since the course was also intended to recruit non-local students, tracking that recruitment data and marketing the course should ensue. And last but not least, I've learned quite a bit from this course. Honestly, this course came at a difficult time between my personal and work lives, and I'm sure all of you hearing this have experienced similar stress. One big takeaway for me is not getting caught up in the perfectionism to procrastination cycle that Dr. Carter spoke to during our first professional development session last class. Another big takeaway surrounds authenticity for ourselves and our organizations. Going back to the first week of this course, we learned about the L&D industry spending tons of money on instruction that does not coincide or is completely disrupted by companies' policies or culture. I think our organizations need to really take this time, especially with COVID and our current social justice climate, to evaluate our authenticity as systems. What works, what doesn't, and what needs to be changed. Next takeaway is about intentionality. Like Brittany's quote shared in the announcements a few weeks back, I can no longer see instruction as just throwing a PowerPoint together. There are so many factors that need to be considered when creating meaningful instruction. I will never be the same. Finally, I began hearing things last course like learning is a process. And I got that we're always learning, but I don't think I quite realized what that meant until working through the ADDIE model the first time. I like this model on the screen because it shows evaluation in the middle and it's circular, denoting how learning is formed onto itself and is a continuous improvement process. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to learn with all of you during this course. I'm listing out my sources for this presentation here, and thank you so much for your time and attention. Take care, y'all, and see you next semester.